Hello YouTube, welcome to the channel. In today's video I'm going to be continuing my anatomy tutorial videos, and this is part 2, and today we're going to be continuing with the human head. So if this sounds interesting, then let's hop into it. Alright, so once again I'm going to show you the end result first so you can see what we're going to end up with. So if this looks like what you want, then let's get started. If not, like I said the last time, just stay tuned. You might pick up 1 or 2 tricks along the way, and who knows. Okay, let's get into it. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to start off with a circle. Okay, it doesn't have to be perfect, and we're going to be doing most of this freehand and eyeballing as we go because we're learning. So let's get started with that. So what I'm going to do is create a circle. You may not be able to see this because it's a construction line, but you can end up with something like this. And then after that, we're gonna divide that in half horizontally and vertically. So I'm gonna get into that. You don't have to be too accurate. Okay. Once you have that, take your pen or pencil, whatever you're using, and put it down on the page. Now from that half mark to the bottom, keep your finger on the bottom of your pencil to where that is. And then what you're going to do is go to the bottom of the circle and place it down again. Wherever your finger hits the page, that's where you're going to create the bottom of your chin. Okay, so mine was roughly... Let me check that again. Mine is roughly here. Okay. So now that I've got that construction line down, I'm going to create the actual shape of the face. I'm going to start off here. And we're going to lead it down to the chin. Here. And lead it down to the chin. Alright, now that we have that, we can get rid of the circle, we can erase it. Like I said, it was a construction line, so it can be erased, but if you want to keep it in, then you can do so as well. I'm going to erase this line as well. And then I'm just going to extend this line and just make it slightly darker. Now what you're going to do is you're going to split this face in half horizontally. So just find halfway, and I'm going to use a ruler just to be a little bit more accurate.
120, so about 60. And I'm going to draw a line across. Yeah.
And then what we're going to do is, like with the previous video, I'm going to use the rule of thirds. So I'm going to split this into thirds. So I'm roughly going to put a line there. And I'm going to put a line there. And do the same thing to the top of. Okay. Okay, so now let me explain what each line is. So this main line here is going to be set out for the eyes. This line over here is going to be the hair line, or it acts as a guideline for the hairline. And then we're going to have the nose and the lips. Okay, I'll give you 2 seconds just to copy that down. Okay, now that we have all of that done, I'm just going to darken this a little bit to indicate the face shape. Alright, now that we have all of this down, we're going to start off with the eyes. So what you're going to do is take the eye line and divide it into 5 equal parts. So let me get into that. I'm just going to measure it out. I'm sitting at 70. Okay. keep in mind that the edges are going to extend off the face, but you should have this. Okay, now that we have all of this, let's create the construction line for the eyes. Okay, so what you need to keep in mind here is these all construction lines, so don't make it too dark because it'll make it really difficult to work with in the future, or when you need to erase lines and try and make it look something like this. And also keep in mind that the wider you make the eyes, the more alert your figure is going to look. The narrower you make your eyes, the more relaxed or the more calm like your figure will look. So just keep that in mind when you create this. Okay, the next step is to draw out the nose. So what I'm going to do is from the end of the eyes, I'm just going to draw straight down to create a box for the nose. Oh, and before I forget, let me just draw in the eyebrows and the line over the eyes for the eyelids before I move on to the nose. Okay, so you should have something like that. Okay, and let's get back to the nose. Like I said, you're going to draw 2 lines down to create a box for the nose. And then what you want to do is you want to create a circle above this nose line, so we have an ordinary looking nose. If you go below it, it's going to be abnormally huge, but if that's the look you're going for, then use your own discretion. And keep it as a construction line. Alright, once you have that, we can start working on the shape of the nose and the details. Okay, you should end up with something like this, and then now I want you to create a really soft line going from the bridges of the nose all the way up to the eyebrows on one side. You'll see why later on. Alright, now that we have all this down, we're going to start off with the lips and the mouth. So what I'm going to do is from the 2 ends of the nose, here and here, I'm going to create a little triangle. And then you want to give yourself a little bit of a gap between the nose and the top lip, and then we can start construction on the top lip. You can make this a bit darker and show where it bridges out. So you're basically creating a very wide M there. Okay, next step is from this M that we just created, and here the entire mouth is going to fit within that space. So you want to try and find roughly halfway between there to create where the 2 lips meet, something like that. And then you want to create the bottom lip at the base here, and that I'm roughly going to indicate that with a light indent, and then shade it in a little bit, so you can have something like that. And then from here, it's basically all up to you how wide you want the lips to be, but I tend to measure down from the center line of the eye going down. So we're just basically closing off that box. So for me, I don't know if you can see it, but if I draw the lines going down here and here, the mouth is basically going to fit in this box. So I'm creating restrictions for myself so I don't make the mouth look too abnormal. And then from there, what you're going to do is just create a very soft line where the 2 lips meet. That's the inner part of the mouth, and then just darken it here on the edges. that further indicates where the two lips meet. And then the top half, the top lip, you're going to create a soft line going across where they meet, something like that. And then you're going to do the same thing for the bottom. So you should have something like that. Okay, the page is looking a little bit messy, so I'm going to do a little bit of cleaning up. While I was cleaning up, I completely forgot to draw in the eyeballs, so I'm going to do that. The thing to remember here is while creating the eyeballs, you don't want to create perfect circles within these gaps. So you don't want the edges of the circles to meet at the top of the eyelids, because then you're going to create a very shocked looking figure. What you want to do is start off at one end and just create curves on either end, so the circles don't actually close, so it looks more realistic and it more looks like a more relaxed face. Alright, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on the hairline. So what you're going to do is from this hairline that we've created here, and at the corner of the eyebrow, just draw a line up, and where this line and this line meet should be somewhere around there. Just draw slightly further upwards towards the third line that we've created over here. And I'm drawing a male figure, so the hairline is going to be slightly more defined than a female figure. And then from here, we're just going to taper it out to the corner like this. And now I'm going to draw in the sideburns. Hair length and sideburns is going to be all dependent of up to you on based on what you're drawing. So keep in mind that my hair style and the one that you will use will vary. So you should end up with something like this. And then an important thing to remember is you're not going to end off the top of the hair on this line. It's going to extend further outwards, because this technically represents the cranium and the top of your scalp, if that makes sense. Okay, now that we have that, we're going to start on the ears. And like I said before, this is all just the basic construction. Once we've completed everything, we'll go back into it and it will basically make it look something like this. So when drawing the ears, you need to keep in mind where it starts and where it ends first off, and mark that out clearly so you don't go over it and make them abnormally huge. So the top of the ear is roughly around the eye line here, and the bottom of the nose line here, that's where the ear would end. So you want to try and keep the ear within this box space. If you go a little bit, that's fine, just make sure it's not too drastic or severe. So I'm going to start off like this. I'm going to go over just a little bit and create a generic ear shape. Obviously everyone's ear shape will differ because we're all not the same. And I'm going to do the same thing to the other side now. Another thing I encourage when doing this is don't be too harsh on yourself, and have a look at this step now. Have a look at this face. If you look closely enough from this sketch I'm creating now and the one I've created before, you can see that this one is slightly narrower. So keep that in mind when you're actually designing, and you can basically think of the face shapes and the bone structure and think of how much more defined each face is going to be based on that. So for example, this face is more narrow, therefore you're going to see a lot more bone structure in this figure instead of this one, if that makes sense. So let me get into that. So I'm going to start off with the cheek lines. It's a narrower face, so it will be a little bit more defined. And then I'm going to make the jawline a little bit more defined. So that's what that looks like. I'm just going to add more detail to my ears. Now that we have all of this, I'm just going to draw in the neck. And let's make it a little bit of a thicker neck. Okay, now that we have everything marked out, we can start shading and making this look more realistic. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go for the obvious detail, and I'm going to start off with the hair, and I'm just going to fill it in. Obviously it's all going to look very different to what yours is because you're probably going to use a different hairstyle, but for what I've got, I'm just going to fill it in. Look, with this you don't have to create like super realistic images or anything like that. We're just doing this to fill in the blanks here so we can see exactly what the face would look like. But the main things to take away here is each step on how to construct this face to make it more proportionate and realistic. I think that'll be fine. I'm gonna go back to the clutch pencil just for the eyebrows because the hair is a little bit thinner. An important thing when drawing hair is try and understand how it grows and look at the natural path of the hair. So for example, for the eyebrows, we know that it usually splits and goes outwards, so it follows a curved motion outwards. So try and create lines going that way and try and keep them as thin as possible. That way you create more believable eyebrows. And then I'm just going to darken the eyelid lines. And then I'm just going to define the eyelashes, the eyelids. And now let me get to work with the eyeballs. I'm not going to add a lot of detail, I'll save that for another video. Okay, now that we're back to the nose, I'm just going to erase this line. I'm just going to leave a very faint outline that only I can probably see. The camera won't be able to pick it up. But what you're going to do is create very soft shadow to create depth between the bridge of the nose and the eyebrow. And I'm just going to soften it a little bit with my eraser. Should look something like that. And then I'm just going to draw 1 or 2 lines underneath the eyes just to make it more realistic. Everyone has 1 or 2 lines. And then let's get back into the nose. We're going to create a little bit of shadow over here to indicate depth, that this bit of nose protrudes outwards. I'll do this in another video where I make more realistic faces, but just a quick tip for people who are looking at that. If you want to create more realistic images, the 2 things to keep in mind is skin texture when going in terms of shading, and that's a completely different video. And the next thing to consider is, like I said, depth, and that's also achieved through shading. Like, let me give you the example of this and this. What I did here is I created a little bit of a shading effect, so it indicates depth perception between the eyes, the eyebrows and the nose. So it indicates that the eyebrows and the nose appear further outward and the eyes are further inward. And the same thing with the tip of the nose here. You create the shadow, and that gives the effect that this bit of the nose protrudes outwards. Now, an important thing to remember when drawing the face for a male versus a female is the lips. In terms of lips, the definition of the male lip is going to be more subtle than female. Female lips are more defined and much more bold. So we're going to chip away at some of these lines here, just soften it out a little bit. Don't want to make them too visible, otherwise it looks more feminine. And then I'm just going to create very light shading effect to give it texture. If you want to shade the bottom lip, that's up to you. Personally, I don't want to do that because it looks more realistic to me just to indicate that by shading in there under your lip. And I'm just going to soften this a little bit and then continue. The shading effect that I did indicates or shows where the lip is situated a lot better to me. Then instead of actually taking the pen and shading the bottom lip and making, to me it would look like a complete mess. But like I said, art is subjective, so to each their own, do whatever you want. Okay, let's add a little bit more facial definition. Like I said, this is a narrower face, so more of the bone structure will be visible. So let me add that in. Let me just create a little bit of shadow for the ear. Okay, that looks really good actually. And then let me just finish it off with the neck. Just shade that in. Okay, there we go. This looks like a good drawing to me. And like I said, you don't have to focus too much on how perfect the end result is. The main thing to take away is each step that I've indicated, starting from the beginning with the circle all the way to completion here. And if you follow each step the way I've indicated it, you should come up with something similar to this, and it should look realistic. But like I said, everything will change depending on your hairstyle and whatever else you decide to choose. Another thing to mention is, depending on the placement of the eyebrows, and like I said, how you draw out the eyelids, facial emotion will change. So keep that in mind, and obviously you can play around with it as you go. That's all I have for you. Okay everyone, that was the tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it. And another thing to remember is that this is only one way to draw the human face. There are many other ways. Another way to draw the face that I would recommend is by Andrew Loomis. There's a book on it, and I suggest you go and have a look at that. That method is a little bit more trickier to get, but I mean, if you can get it, it's a pretty good way to draw the face. But that's all I have for you today. Before I go, I would just like to ask you to please subscribe, leave a like, and drop a comment, because I genuinely want to hear what everyone thinks. But that's all I have for you today. See you next time.